ancient technologies, and it's an absolute honour this evening to be with you, Rick, and what an honour to be with an institute for ancient philosophy, which we have now put together with yourself and me and Guy Nibiru. He will come, no doubt, later on this evening and have a chat with us. But what a fantastic thing to finally have tours, to have something to talk about where we've met last year and actually gone away together, and we can talk about what we've done. Rick, what a fantastic footing for everyone to come and meet us and really have their ideas, where they can speak to us, they can have their ideas shared. It's a place where free thinkers now have freedom to come and be themselves. What do you think?
I couldn't be more thrilled for finally having the beginning of the Institute. We are expecting great things. We are expecting to do great things, and we are expecting to receive great things for many contributors that we'll be finding on the way. It might be interesting to describe how this all came to be. We met on Twitter. We were introduced. You as a leader of a magnificent team introduced me to some aspects of ancient history that I was not aware of. We start to talk, and then it came the time for your tour in Portugal. I was fortunate enough to meet you in one of those days. We get along pretty well together, and since then we start talking on that we should do something. We should do something to try and use all these brilliant minds that we are seeing pushing theories forward in the media, people that interact with us. We needed a place in order to finally set one of the largest, if not the largest, database for researchers to come and look at and take material from.
Well, I think with that in mind, Rick, I think when you and I met and when I toured a couple of years ago in Portugal and Guy mentioned yourself as one of the top researchers in Portugal, it intrigued me while we were out on tour. And I contacted yourself, if you remember, and introduced myself when we were meeting archaeologists and people of the same ilk as us within Portugal, and humbly really going around to a Christian-based society that doesn't look at prehistory, really. I mean, when I came there, I was humbled to meet people like yourself that actually do look beyond the realms of what Christianity and Rome and everything actually is looked at within Portugal. There's nothing other than that in Portugal.
Yeah.
That is the way it's looked at. And when I came there, and obviously Guy had been on my team for quite a long time, and he was very much a free thinker within that area. And when we were studying the hallmarks, to hear that there was a top researcher within Portugal that he respected that we could meet, and for me to contact someone like yourself, it was an absolute honour to text yourself. And thank you for coming on tour with Guy and myself last year. We went and visited Panoios together, and what an experience it was. I mean,
Amazing place.
it was, wasn't it? And we'll talk about that in future episodes, I'm sure. But what we'd like to talk about this evening with everybody would be something along the lines of where ancient technologies within the ancient world have been used before. And we consider that a huge topic because we're not only looking at huge megalithic stones. I mean, some of these vary, Rick, from 50 ton to 200 ton that are placed at angles. Some were within the ground. We could speculate on that. The stone of the pregnant lady is obviously not been on scales, but she's around about 1,250 ton metric, if not up towards 1,500 ton. And if you look at Baalbek in Lebanon, you've got the trilithon stones that are very well documented that are actually surrounding the foot of this massive megalithic structure. So before we even talk about what might adorn, the top of this structure, what do you think on the stones of the megalithic stones around this structure, the trilithon stones, the stone of the pregnant lady? What are your thoughts on that and how they could have been moved?
So, first of all, we tend to look at things from our modern perspective on how we would move such a stone. And what we would do today would be to build a structure on site that would be able to lift it and then move it inch by inch, probably only a few feet a day, because of how the mass of gravity of these things react to movement. It all has to be done very slowly. In fact, if you see any building of a bridge, for instance, it has those massive slabs of cement that they have to transport over those that are already placed. It's all done very, very, very slowly. So in the ancient times, I think that they had to conceive a system that is nothing like we think it today or see displayed in the main academic views, because it's impractical. Even when you think of something that weighs 1,000 tons or 1,500 tons, it has to be another way to do it. It cannot be just ropes and pulleys, because it's ridiculous. There is no manpower capable of pushing such a thing or moving it.
Well, from an engineering standpoint, Mick, you've got a couple of things to think of, haven't you? You've
Yeah.
got a logistical aspect, number one.
Exactly.
You've got a fulcrum aspect, pivotal aspect. How much rope would you actually need? We're talking millions and millions and millions
Yes, yes.
square yards of rope, meters, whatever.
No, and you have the
Amount of
people.
manpower to keep that stable on a fulcrum
Yeah.
is uphill and placed over a already existing stone
Yeah.
structure. That's impossible unless you've got
We've talked
something else.
about this before, and I will display images for the people know what I'm talking about. In much recent times, when we tried to lift the obelisk that is at the Vatican, the whole work of just lifting it was so complex and required so much people with something that is so much smaller than the stone of the pregnant lady, that it's about
Yeah.
incredible. So you have to think of the amount of people that is there. You have to feed them, right? So you have to think of all these logistic problems of moving such a
And
thing.
not only that, in Lebanon, Rick, you would have to think about it's never been documented that there was any hemp rope or anything like that within the region
Exactly.
at all within that time period. So where did it come from?
Yeah.
And the Romans don't actually document. They do say that they've attempted to move it, but they don't say
No,
that they
no,
could.
no. In
So
fact,
their equipment couldn't move it. So whose could have moved it? But
my
since excavation underneath the stone of the pregnant lady, there's actually a bigger stone that they were planning to quarry.
yes, yes. And there's even a bigger one people have proposed in
It's bigger,
China.
yeah,
Yeah, in
yeah,
China there is an
yeah.
even bigger one that dwarfs
Well,
this.
you've got what's called Yangshan
Yeah.
Quarry in China.
So it's
And
amazing.
like in Yangshan Quarry, which is actually mega important in this, what you're looking at within the megaliths that are 32,000 ton. The middle megalith is 16.2 thousand tons. What people forget to talk about is where did the rest of the quarry go? I mean, come on, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
Where did it go?
And look
No,
at
no one can reportedly tell us
no.
where
And
it goes.
and when you plan to do a project on this scale, you must inquire why. What purpose so important would it serve that it require a job of such complexity and size? So what was that
Magnitude, yeah, yeah.
yeah, why? Why would someone try to have and transport into what place to do what? You see? Because, for instance, when you see in France those rows of menhirs on those fields that go for 2 miles long with 10, 12, 13 rows of stones. You look at it and
Yes.
you see, and I for one, immediately think this. If you place, it's well known scientifically, if you place a tube of metal with a mesh and a copper tube within that same tube, exterior tube, and place it on the ground, you get 1 volt for each one of these cylinders that you put on the ground. So there is
Nice.
current on the ground. Always. So if you
Yeah.
place 12 of this, you have 12 volts. You can charge a 12-volt battery. If you put 24, you can charge a 24-volt battery. But besides the point,
Depending on
yes,
positioning, of course.
my point is, we see these places used and then abandoned, and there you can see the purpose why they took the job and why they picked the place, because we can measure today the energies that go through the earth, and you know exactly why they chose that place. It doesn't mean that the place is still as strong as it was then, and perhaps that's the reason why it was abandoned. But
Yeah.
going back to the stones that you started the conversation with, if you are going to use such a stone, is there a place in the vicinity that we can look at and think this is where the stone was going to be placed? For instance, you have the temple of Jupiter on top of those gigantic stones at the base that we are discussing. Is it possible that that stone was fitting into the middle of that structure before the Romans covered the temple with their much still magnificent architecture, but much less in weight, in size, in dimension? Could it be that it was going to be placed in that center, like a magnificent, gigantic monolith? Because it must have a
Quite
place.
possibly, yeah.
It could have. It must have a place. If they took everything from it, they weren't going to move it without having a destination for it, right? You think it was going to serve as a base? Is it going to be placed upright? What are the thoughts on this?
I like that. I love that as a thought process. And could it have been pulled up maybe into a vertical position and shaped down to where it could have been logistically moved? However, the trilithon stones, quote unquote, were put into place as they were. So one would presume that the stone of the pregnant lady had the same
The same function.
technological aspect to be able to move into place. How it would have been manufactured within
Sure.
its
Imagine
procurement, it might be different, maybe.
if you have an underground structure carved in the bedrock of a highly crystalline rock, for instance, and you needed to produce more energy for whatever reason, you need to place heavy weights on top of it. So Baalbek is a fine example because they are underground structures and they used gigantic stones. Could they be greedy and trying to get even more heavy stone to place on top of the structure to produce even more energy in the underground by piezoelectric functions?
But that's exactly what you would suggest, isn't it, when you look at these massive megalithic structures, Rick?
To amplify.
And the interlocking polygonal stonework and huge stones. Why were they interlocking would be a huge question, and that could help, couldn't it? If the piezoelectrical content to the stone, the mineralogy and the magnetic content was feasible, then would we not have then something that you could modulate using frequency to maybe manipulate not only the stone but maybe the environment around it?
Yes, definitely. For instance, if we go back to the standing stones that we see on Iberia, you see in France, you see in England, I think those fields of stones were exactly that. Were a network of energies that were used to make the land more fertile, to attract animals. There could be many explanations why that sort of energy was being harnessed and used on the land. In fact, that's exactly the difference that we see when we go from a pagan world that was not pagan at all into a Christian world where those same places were used completely different. While the ancient world used that energy outwards into the people, into the land, into the animals, into nature, what Christianity did was build structures on those places that by their architecture alone concentrate all that source of energy within the building itself.
So could you then surmise that maybe when that period of time was going on, that maybe the Christian structures took over a pagan structure,
Yes.
like you say, with a physical aspect, but and the harmonics, the vibration, the frequency, the actual tones that were used on those specific, like what people would in the audience here is like ley lines, magnetic lines, and so on, using Mother Earth, as it were, as a actual, well, could we say control factor at this? So is the truth not out there for those that really want it? I actually think it is, Rick.
Yes, I
I
think.
really do. And what an evening that we've had, Ricardo.
Yeah, indeed.
It's been an absolute honour
Same
to have
here.
spoken to you, not only within the acoustical properties that might have happened within the ancient technologies of the ancient world, but what an evening that it's been speaking personally to you about, well, the things that others don't. And I look forward
To our
to,
next talk, yes, very much so, very much so.
yeah,
So,
me too. Thanks ever so much indeed, Ricardo. It's been an
yeah,
absolute honour.
I hope everyone enjoyed being us in the very first video of the Institute for Natural Philosophy, the Research Center for the Ancient World. Welcome to the Institute. See you soon. Bye, Phil. Thank you very much.
Kind regards, Ricardo.